The dust carried their laughter farther than it deserved. She kept her shawl tight across her shoulders as she crossed the wooden planks of the boardwalk, every step echoing against glass windows and sharper stairs. Ruth Calder had grown used to it, the way men elbowed each other, the way women covered their mouths with gloved hands. What stung worse than any whisper was the deliberate cruelty of their faces twisted into smiles, mouths moving in mockery she could not hear. She could read lips well enough, mute, broken, half a woman. She caught the words, though no sound reached her. Each syllable might as well have been branded on her skin. The general store's door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of flour, leather, and kerosene. Mr. Dillard, the shopkeeper, barely lifted his head. She placed a small list on the counter, pencil-marked and folded twice for neatness. His eyes flicked over it, then back at her. "Out," he said, jerking his thumb toward the door. Ruth held her ground, pointing to the list, then to the shelves behind him. "Out," he repeated louder, though he knew she couldn't hear. "I don't serve your kind of trouble. Can't argue with you. Can't warn you proper. Now get." Heat rose up her neck, but she folded the paper again, sliding it into her palm. A boy snickered from the corner, pretending to sign clumsy, crooked gestures, his friends erupting in laughter. Ruth left before they could see the tears gathering. Outside, the street burned with midday sun. Wagon wheels rattled, hooves struck sparks from stone. She wove through it all, head bent, heart hammering. Pride kept her walking until she was past the livery stables and into the edge of open range. There, finally, her shoulders sagged. That was when she saw him. Jonas Hale leaned against the corral fence, a man who spoke less than most but carried himself with a certainty words couldn't measure. Tall, raw-boned, the lines of his face set like canyon rock. He was watching the horses shift and stamp within the pen. When he noticed her, his brow furrowed, not with scorn, but something else. Recognition. She started to move past, but his hand lifted, not in greeting, in signing. "You okay?" The world stopped. Her breath caught as though she'd been struck. She blinked hard, certain her eyes had lied. But no. His hand shaped words clear and deliberate. "Don't let them see you hurt." Ruth froze, fingers trembling. It had been years since she'd seen anyone speak her language. Her father had known a little once before the fever took him. Since then, nothing. Silence had been her cage. Now a stranger had opened a door. She answered slowly, hands stiff from disuse. "You sign?" Jonas's mouth tugged at one corner, almost a smile. "Some. Enough. My sister couldn't hear either. She taught me." Her knees threatened to buckle. All the shame of the morning, all the cutting whispers, broke loose inside her chest. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone inside her silence. Jonas leaned closer, his shadow falling across the dust. "Come by the ranch tomorrow. I need someone to manage remount records. Paperwork's better suited for hands like yours." Her heart stuttered. Work? Independence? A chance to matter in this place that had done nothing but shove her aside? She wanted to protest, to ask why me, to question his motives. But his eyes carried no pity, only steadiness, like a river running deep. She nodded. Once. Firm. He tipped his hat and turned back to the horses. For him, it was finished. For her, it was just beginning. The next day dawned pale and sharp, the prairie stretching out like a sheet of hammered brass. Ruth walked the mile to Hale Ranch, clutching her shawl. Against the morning chill, she rehearsed the signs she might need. Thank you, numbers, names. She tried to steady the fear gnawing her stomach. The ranch yard buzzed with life. Men forked hay, hammered nails into loose boards, shouted instructions Ruth couldn't hear. She kept her gaze steady, reminding herself she belonged here now. Jonas met her at the barn. He wasted no time with greetings. Handing her a ledger, He signed, "Check foals, record brands, dates." "Can you?" Ruth's chin lifted. "I can." So began her new place. Days folded into rhythm, pages inked neat, horses tallied, Jonas's nods of approval silent but weighty. She worked in the shade of the barn while the men sweated in the fields. At first they stared, muttered. But work done well leaves little room for mockery. Still, unease simmered. Ruth felt eyes on her back, resentful, mocking, or worse, predatory. She knew how fragile her footing was. This town would never forgive her difference, not truly. And then the storm broke. It started with hoofprints that didn't match any on the Hale remount list. Jonas found the broken fence at dawn, wood splintered and horses gone. By noon, whispers ran through town. Thieves had struck, and no one had seen a thing. Everyone except Ruth. Her careful eye had traced patterns in the dust, the uneven rhythm, of a lame horse, the doubled-back trail near the arroyo. She tugged at Jonas's sleeve, signing fast. Not riders from outside, local. They circled back, waited, took 6. Jonas's gaze sharpened. He didn't ask how she knew, he only signed, "Show me." Together, they followed the trail, shadows stretching long behind them. Ruth's silence had always been her curse. Now, for the first time, it was her gift. The trail did not hide its secrets, only waited for patient eyes. Dust hung low in the canyon mouth, hoofprints pressed deep into the soil where the herd had been driven through. Jonas crouched, fingers tracing the edges of the prints. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Ruth stood beside him, scanning the ground, her shawl pulled tight against the morning wind. She pointed, sharp, certain. The lame horse's drag mark. A boot heel turned wrong. A broken mesquite twig bent at waist height. Her hands moved swiftly in sign. 3 men, one short, one heavy. They knew the land. Not strangers. Jonas's jaw flexed. His silence was a weight, heavier than any shouted oath. He stood, dusting his palms. His eyes lifted toward the horizon, where the canyon narrowed into shadow. "We'll set a trap," he signed, slow and deliberate. "But not yet. Let them think we don't know." Ruth nodded, though a chill passed through her. The thieves thought her silence made her blind, but she saw more than they ever guessed, and that frightened her almost as much as it thrilled her. Back at the ranch, the men bristled. Horses gone meant wages lost, and tongues wagged like dry leather in the wind. "She's the reason," one spat when he thought she couldn't see. "Brought bad luck with her. Hale never lost stock till he brought her into the books." Another laughed. "What's she gonna do? Write the horses back?" The words cut, but Ruth did not flinch. She dipped her quill into the ink and kept her script steady, each line of the ledger defying their mockery. Still, when Jonas entered the barn, he saw the tightness in her shoulders. He strode to the men, his voice low and flat. "You got a problem with her. You got a problem with me. She works harder than the lot of you." The barn went quiet. Even without raising his tone, Jonas Hale's words carried weight. The men looked down, muttering. Ruth's chest ached, not from shame this time, but from something warmer. Loyalty. Protection. For once, someone had stood between her and the world's cruelty. 2 nights later, the chance came. The thieves slipped back under cover of darkness, certain no watchful eyes would mark them. Ruth had been waiting. She had studied the moon's rise, the wind's drift, the hollow where hoofbeats carried differently. She woke Jonas with a hand on his arm, signs crisp in the lantern glow. "They're here. South Gate." Together they moved into the night. The air smelled of dust and horse sweat. Jonas carried his rifle. Ruth carried nothing but the sharpness of her mind. They reached the South Gate just as shadows moved along the fence line. 3 figures, just as she had said. One short, one heavy, and the third tall as a pine. Jonas motioned, and Ruth nodded. She had set the trap earlier, slipped the latch of the outer gate so it would swing shut with the weight of the herd. The thieves cut the rails, whispering curses. The horses stirred, hooves restless. Then, with a crack, the rails gave way. The herd bolted. The thieves whooped, too soon. The gate swung closed behind them, iron clanging like a bell of judgment. Jonas stepped into the lantern light, rifle leveled. "That's far enough." The men froze. One cursed. The heavy one spat in the dirt. "You won't shoot, not in front of her." Jonas's face did not move. His silence was more dangerous than any threat. Behind him, Ruth stepped forward, shawl whipping in the wind. Her hands moved in the firelight, sharp as blades. "I saw you. I followed your trail. You thought I was nothing. But I see everything." The short thief blinked, confused. The heavy one sneered. But the tall one shifted uneasily. She knows," he muttered. Jonas jerked his rifle toward the corral. "Inside. Sheriff will have words with you come morning." Grudgingly, the men obeyed. By dawn, Sheriff McCready rode in, dust thick on his coat. He eyed the bound thieves, then the horses safe behind the fence. "Funny thing," he said, spitting tobacco. "Town told me a deaf woman couldn't hear a thing, couldn't call for help. Yet here you stand, stock saved, thieves caught." His gaze shifted to Ruth. For once there was no pity in it, only respect. "You got more grit than half the men in this county," he said. Ruth stood straighter, pride warming her chest. Jonas glanced her way, and she caught the faintest curve of his mouth, almost a smile. For the first time she believed she might belong, but belonging carried a cost. The town's pride had been wounded, and wounded pride festers. Whispers started again, sharper now. Not just mockery, fear, resentment. "She made fools of us," they hissed. "What else is she hiding?" And Ruth knew the fight was far from over. Morning came with silence too heavy to trust. The ranch yard was quiet, too quiet. Men moved about their chores, but voices were clipped, eyes averted. Jonas noticed it first, the hush that wasn't respect, but suspicion. Ruth felt it too. She caught the sideways glances, the lips mouthing words she didn't need to hear. Witch, trouble, curse. Mockery had shifted into something darker. Blame. Jonas walked beside her toward the barn, his hand brushing the brim of his hat in silent. "Greeting," he signed. "They're rattled. Don't let it shake you," she answered with steady fingers. "I won't." But inside, her stomach twisted. At the general store, things grew worse. Ruth had gone with Jonas to tally supplies, her list precise. Dillard the shopkeeper scowled as she placed the folded paper on the counter. "You think you made a hero out of yourself," he sneered, loud enough for everyone in the store to hear. "Catching thieves don't change what you are. Folks like you bring trouble down on good men." Ruth's jaw tightened. She lifted her chin, refusing to bend. But the women nearby drew their children closer, as if she carried disease. The boy, who had mocked her signing before, started again, jerking his hands into crude shapes, making the others laugh. Jonas's shadow fell across the counter. His voice came low, dangerous. "You'll take her list, Dillard, and you'll fill it, or you'll deal with me." The shopkeeper muttered, but he obeyed. Ruth wanted to thank Jonas, to show him what it meant to have someone stand at her side. But words, spoken or signed, felt too fragile against the tide of hatred swelling around them. That night, she sat alone by the bunkhouse fire, ledger open on her lap. She tried to write neat lines, but her hand trembled. Jonas approached. Boots. Crunching softly in the dirt, he signed, "You're stronger than they'll ever admit. Don't let their weakness become your burden." Her throat tightened. Slowly, carefully, she signed back, "Why do you help me?" Others would have turned away. Jonas hesitated. Firelight carved his face into planes of shadow and stone. Then his hands moved. Because I know silence. Words fail me too often. You don't waste them. You only give what matters. Her heart stumbled. His blunt honesty was like the man himself, unadorned, steady, impossible to ignore. For the first time she smiled. A small thing, fragile as glass, but real. Jonas's expression softened, and though he didn't smile back, his eyes warmed. With something she hadn't seen before, days bled into weeks. Together they worked, Ruth with her ledgers and keen eye, Jonas with his hands and quiet presence. A rhythm formed, wordless but sure. Trust, slow as winter thaw, began to take root. But the town was restless. The captured thieves had friends, men who didn't like being made fools of, especially not by a woman who couldn't hear, and a rancher who rarely spoke. The warning came in small ways. A cut rope here, a smashed window there. One morning, Ruth found a crude drawing pinned to the barn door, a stick figure with crossed-out ears hanging from a rope. Her hands shook as she showed Jonas. Rage flared in his eyes, but his signs were calm. We'll face it together. You're not alone anymore. Not alone. The words echoed in her chest, a vow stronger than any she'd ever known. Still, fear gnawed at her. She lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling beams, imagining flames in the barn, gunfire in the yard. She knew how quickly mobs could form, how easily fear turned to violence. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, she walked the corral, hands tracing the fence rails. Jonas joined her, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He handed her one, then leaned on the rail, staring at the horses. Without looking at her, he signed, "If they come, we'll stand. I won't let them drive you out." Ruth swallowed hard. Her reply came slow, careful. Why risk so much for me? Jonas turned at last, his eyes steady as iron. Because you're worth it. The world tilted beneath her feet. She clutched the coffee mug, heat searing her palms, but it was nothing compared to the fire in her chest. In the quiet that followed, the first seeds of something deeper took hold. Not yet love, not yet spoken, but a bond forged in the silence where others only heard emptiness. And Ruth began to understand. The greatest danger she faced was not the town's cruelty, nor the thieves' vengeance. It was daring to hope for more. The wind carried warning before the riders showed their faces. The horizon shimmered under noon heat when Ruth spotted them. 3 riders cresting the ridge above the ranch. Dust plumed behind their horses, shadows stretched long. She narrowed, her eyes, hand shielding her face from the sun. Jonas joined her at the fence, gaze hardening. "Friends of the thieves," Ruth signed. Jonas nodded once. His hand rested lightly on his rifle. "They'll want blood back for blood lost." The riders descended slow, deliberate, letting the ranch know they were coming. When they reined up in the yard, their leader, thick-jawed, scar bisecting his brow, leaned forward in the saddle. "You, Hale?" he barked. Jonas gave a single nod. "You've got property belongs to us. 3 men sitting in the county jail on account of your say-so. We aim to see that mistake corrected." Jonas's silence stretched like wire pulled taut. Finally he spoke, voice flat as stone. "Sheriff's got them, not me," the scarred man spat. "Then we'll take what's ours in trade. 6 horses, and her." He jerked his chin toward Ruth. The words struck like a lash. Ruth stiffened, but she forced her hands steady, signing sharp enough to cut the air. "Tell them no." Jonas didn't need telling. His rifle lifted, deliberate. "You're done here," the men snarled, muttered, but they weren't fools. Outnumbered on another man's land, they wheeled their horses and rode off, spitting threats into the dust. But Ruth knew they'd be back. That night, the ranch braced itself. Jonas doubled the watch. Men muttered about leaving, about whether she was worth the risk. Ruth kept to the barn, ledger open but untouched, hands trembling too badly to write. She thought of her father, of the sickness that had taken him, of the silence left behind, of the years spent mocked, unwanted, barely tolerated, and now here, on the brink of losing the only place she'd felt she belonged. Jonas found her hunched over the ledger, shoulders shaking. His shadow fell across the page. He signed slowly. "They'll come. We'll be ready." Ruth's reply was unsteady. "They want me gone. Easier if I leave." Jonas's jaw set hard. His hands moved with certainty. "You're not running. Not from them. Not from anyone." She looked up, eyes searching his. "Why?" For once, his silence was broken. "Because this is your home now." The words hit deeper than any vow. She turned away quickly, lest he see the tears sliding down her cheeks. The attack came 3 nights later. Lanterns flared in the dark, horses screamed, and the crack of splitting wood split the night wide open. Ruth bolted from her bunk, bare, feet pounding across the dirt. Flames licked the hay barn, orange against the black sky. Jonas was already there, rifles spitting fire, his men shouting as shadows darted in and out of torchlight. Ruth caught sight of the scarred rider, face twisted in rage. Her pulse thundered. She couldn't hear the shots, but she saw the flashes, saw men fall, saw the chaos unfolding. And she knew this wasn't just about horses or revenge. This was about breaking her. She seized a bucket, filled it at the trough, and ran toward the flames. Heat scorched her skin as she heaved water against the fire. Again and again, until her arms screamed. Other hands joined hers, emboldened by her defiance. Together they fought the blaze back. At the edge of the yard, Jonas grappled with the scarred man. The two crashed against the corral fence, fists striking, boots kicking up dirt. Jonas took a blow to the ribs, staggered, then surged back, driving. His opponent hard into the dust. Ruth dropped the bucket, racing forward. She couldn't shout, couldn't warn him of the knife glinting in the scarred man's hand. Instead, she snatched up a fallen rail and hurled it. The wood struck true, knocking the blade away. Jonas finished it. One swift strike, and the man lay gasping in the dirt. The remaining riders, seeing their leader broken, fled into the night. Silence settled, broken only by the hiss of dying flames. The yard reeked of smoke and sweat. Jonas straightened, chest heaving, eyes meeting Ruth's. Without hesitation, he signed, "You saved my life." Her hands trembled as she answered, "We saved each other." By dawn, the sheriff arrived to haul off the scarred man, his threats fading into the rattle of wagon wheels. The ranch hands, once suspicious, now clapped Ruth on the shoulder, muttering words she couldn't hear but understood all the same. Respect, acceptance. She stood among them, exhausted but unbroken, and for the first time, the silence around her felt like strength instead of shame. But as the sun climbed, Ruth's heart knew the battle wasn't truly over. She had won their respect for now, but respect in this land was fragile, like glass waiting for the next stone. And deep inside, she feared the next stone was already in someone's hand. The town's whispers grew louder than the church bell. By Sunday, word of the attack had spread through Dust River like fire through dry grass. Ruth felt it before she saw it, the shift in faces as she walked to town beside Jonas. Women pulled children close, men turned their shoulders, lips moving with barbed words she didn't need to hear. Inside the church, the preacher's voice rolled strong, but Ruth caught the sidelong glances, the murmurs behind hymnals. Her silence had become a story, twisted into threat. She draws trouble. She don't belong. After service, Sheriff McCready stopped Jonas near the steps. His words were calm, but his eyes weighed heavy. "You've made yourself a storm sheltering." Her, Hale. Some folks see it as honor. Others see it as weakness. Jonas didn't flinch. I don't care how they see it. The sheriff tipped his hat, gaze drifting to Ruth. You oughta. Fear in a crowd's harder to put out than fire. The general store that week. The tension boiled over. Ruth placed her list down neat as always. Dillard shoved it back across the counter. No more, he snapped. I don't want your kind of trouble under my roof. Ruth froze, her hands lifted in protest. Please. I pay. Dillard's lip curled. Don't care if you pay in gold. You're cursed, and I'll not have my store burned because you can't keep peace. The words struck like blows. Around her, customers muttered approval. Ruth gathered her shawl and left, cheeks burning. Jonas caught up with her outside, his jaw tight as iron. He signed, rough and sharp. You don't need them. We'll find another way. But Ruth's heart twisted. All her life, she'd fought for a place. And here again, she was turned out, marked as less than whole. That night, she sat by the fire in Jonas's cabin, ledger unopened on the table. Jonas watched her a long while before signing. You did more than any of them when it counted. You saved this ranch. You saved me. Her fingers moved slowly, halting. It's not enough. They'll never accept me. Jonas leaned forward, the firelight catching the sharp planes of his face. Then let them choke on their own blindness. You've nothing to prove. His hand stilled. He hesitated, then added, Not to me. Her chest tightened. Heat rushed her cheeks. For once she could not answer. But the space between them brimmed with words unspoken. Days later, as the ranch settled into uneasy peace, the sheriff rode up again. He dismounted slow, dust heavy on his boots. Town council's restless, he said to Jonas. They're talking petitions. Say she ought to leave for everyone's safety. I can't hold them back long if it comes to vote. Jonas's hand went to his rifle, but the sheriff raised a palm. I don't like it either, but you both need to understand. This fight's bigger than horses or thieves. It's pride, and pride makes men dangerous. Ruth read his lips, ice sinking in her stomach. She stepped forward, lifting her hands. What if I prove my worth? Show them what I can do. The sheriff frowned. Some folks can't be shown. Jonas glanced at her, then signed with deliberate care. Then we'll show the ones who can. And damn the rest. That evening, Ruth worked late in the barn. Her hands inked neat lines in the ledger, but her mind raced. She thought of the townsfolk, of the hatred that shadowed every step. She thought of Jonas, his steadiness, his wordless faith. And she thought of her father's teachings. When the world won't speak your language, make it learn. Her pen stilled. A thought struck. Something daring. Something bigger than defiance. The next morning, she signed it to Jonas across the kitchen table. I want to start a circle. Teach signing. For children, for workers, anyone who wants to learn. Jonas raised a brow. You think they'll come? Her reply was firm. Some will. Enough. And that's where it begins. For the first time, his mouth curved in a true smile. Small, but real. He signed, Then we'll build it together. But Ruth knew it would not be so simple. For every child eager to learn, there would be a parent ready to sneer. For every hand shaped in kindness, another would tighten around a stone. Still her heart lifted. This was more than survival. This was claiming space, daring the town to see her not as curse but as teacher, as belonging. And when Jonas's hand brushed hers, steady as his vow, she let herself hope. Hope always drew shadows behind it. The first circle met in the ranch yard, under the shade of the cottonwood. A handful of children came shyly, their mothers lingering at a distance. Ruth knelt on the grass, shawl slipping from her shoulders, and showed them how to shape their hands into letters. The children laughed, not cruelly this time, but with wonder. Little fingers traced the air clumsily, copying her movements. A, B, C. Ruth's heart swelled. For the first time, her silence was not a barrier but a bridge. Jonas stood nearby, arms crossed, watching. When a boy hesitated, Jonas signed the letter with steady hands. The boy grinned, copying him. Slowly, the others followed. By the end of the hour, half a dozen children could spell their names. Their mothers watched with tight mouths, but none pulled their children away. Ruth's chest ached with joy, but joy had enemies. 2 days later, someone smeared tar across the barn door, scrawling crude words she didn't need to hear to understand. Witch. Cursed. Leave. Ruth stared at it, fists trembling. Jonas came up. Behind her, jaw set hard. He scrubbed it clean himself, each stroke of the rag like a vow. When he was done, he signed. They're scared. That means you're winning. Ruth wanted to believe him, but the fear in her gut said otherwise. The next circle was smaller. Only 3 children returned. Their parents muttered excuses about chores, sickness, anything to hide the truth. Someone had warned them off. Ruth's heart broke as the children hesitated at the fence, then trudged away. Only one boy stayed. Tommy, the blacksmith's son. His mother, arms crossed, stood behind him, daring anyone to challenge her. "Go on, Ruth," she said, loud enough for the street to hear. "You teach him. He'll need strong hands for the forge. Might as well make 'em useful." Ruth's eyes burned with gratitude. She knelt again, showing Tommy the shapes for mother and strong. His mother's lips softened, but behind them, men on the porch muttered. One spat in the dust. "Teaching tricks. Next she'll be teaching rebellion." Jonas's voice cut through, low and flat. "Careful." The muttering died, but not the hate behind it. That night, Jonas and Ruth sat by the cabin fire. She traced letters in the air, slow and thoughtful. He watched her hands, then signed. "Why risk it? You've already proven yourself." Her reply came, fierce, steady. "Because it's not enough for me to belong. They need to understand. The children deserve a language that welcomes them, not shuts them out." Jonas's gaze softened. "And if the town refuses?" Ruth's hands stilled. Then, slowly, "Then we'll build our own town, right here, with whoever chooses to see." His eyes held hers a long moment. Then he nodded once, firm. The escalation came at dusk a week later. Ruth was walking back from the corral when shadows stepped out to block her path. 3 men, the same who had spat on the porch. "You think you can change this place?" one sneered. "Think you can make us bow to your dumb hands?" Ruth's heart hammered. She glanced toward the barn, but Jonas was too far. She squared her shoulders anyway. Her hands moved, sharp as steel. "I won't bow, I won't break, and one day your children will speak my language." The men laughed, cruel and loud. One shoved her shoulder. She stumbled, caught herself, and stared them down. Then Jonas's voice cut through the dusk like a rifle crack. "Enough." He strode forward, rifle in hand, eyes burning. The men faltered, backing a step. Jonas didn't raise the gun. He didn't have to. His silence was threat enough. They spat curses and slunk off into the shadows. Ruth stood shaking, breath ragged. Jonas's hand steadied her shoulder. He signed, "They won't stop. It'll get worse." She met his gaze, fire flaring in her chest. "Then so will we." By lantern light that night, Jonas spoke the words he'd held back for weeks. "They can hate me all they want, but they won't take you from this place. Not now, not ever." Ruth's breath caught. She lifted her hand slowly, deliberately, not as protector, as partner. The silence stretched, deep as the prairie night. Then Jonas signed one word, simple, certain. Yes. Torches always burned brighter in a mob's hands. The warning came in the crackle of fire carried on the wind. Ruth jolted upright in her bunk, the glow flickering against the window. Shouts followed, angry, slurred, carried by too many. Voices. She threw on her shawl and ran to the yard. They came from town in a mass of shadows, 20 men at least. Torches flared, pitchforks and rifles glinted. At their front stood Dillard, the shopkeeper, jaw set like iron. "Bring her out," he bellowed. "She's cursed this land long enough. First horses stolen, then barns set ablaze. Next it'll be worse. She don't belong here." The mob roared agreement, fire painting their faces in hellish light. Jonas strode from the cabin, rifle in hand. He stood before Ruth, shoulders square, his voice cut low but steady. "She stays. You'll not touch her," Dillard spat. "You'll risk your ranch, your men, your life for her." Jonas's silence stretched like a drawn bow. Then he signed, slow, deliberate, hands lifted so all could see. "Yes, she is mine to stand beside, not to cast out." The crowd wavered. Some muttered, uncertain, others sneered. Behind Jonas, Ruth stepped forward. Fear licked her throat, but she stood tall. Her hands carved the air, fierce and certain. "I am not your curse. I saved your horses. I saved this town from thieves, and I will not be silenced." Mothers pulled their children closer. Men shifted uneasily. The mob was fire and doubt, teetering either way. Dillard snarled, lifting his torch. "Enough of your witch tricks. Tonight we end this." He lunged forward. Jonas's rifle snapped to his shoulder. "You take one more step," he growled, "and you'll never take another." The mob hushed. Fire crackled. The moment stretched on a knife's edge, then a voice rang out, small, high. Tommy, the blacksmith's son, pushed forward through the crowd. His little hands lifted, shaky but sure. He signed clumsily, "She, safe. She, good." The silence shattered. His mother stepped beside him, chin high. "My boy speaks truth. She's done more good than any of you standing here with fire in your fists." A ripple went through the crowd. Men faltered, glanced at one another. The fire of rage dimmed under the weight of shame. Dillard's face twisted. "Fools, all of you," he spat. But when he turned back, Jonas's rifle barrel was steady, Ruth's gaze unwavering. The shopkeeper dropped his torch. One by one, the others followed, flames sputtering out in the dirt. The mob broke apart, grumbling, vanishing into the night like smoke. Only silence remained, thick and heavy. Jonas lowered his rifle, shoulders loosening at last. He turned to Ruth, eyes searching hers. For the first time he spoke plain, no silence. Between them, "You're not going anywhere. Not now, not ever." Her breath hitched. Hands trembling, she signed back. "And not without you." Jonas reached, taking her hands in his, rough, calloused, steady. The firelight flickered over them, not as destroyer now, but as witness. Behind them, the ranch hands stepped closer, one after another. Tommy grinned wide, still shaping crooked letters. The circle had already begun. Ruth looked around. The ranch yard that had once felt like exile now thrummed with belonging. She wasn't just surviving. She was standing, loved, and unbreakable. And she knew. This night would not be remembered for fear. But for the moment silence became stronger than shouting, when hands spoke louder than torches. But morning would bring its own reckoning. Sheriff McCready would ride out. The town would whisper again, twist the story as towns always did. Still, Ruth stood ready. For once she was not alone in the fight, and the bond forged in fire was stronger than any chain of hate. The corral held more than horses that morning. It held history. The sun rose clean and gold over Hale Ranch, washing the dust in light that seemed almost holy. The yard bustled with quiet excitement. Men brushing coats, women straightening, shawls, children darting about with wide eyes. At the corral gate stood Jonas Hale, steady as ever, but with something softer in his face now. His coat was plain, his hands calloused, but his posture was proud. Beside him, Ruth Calder walked forward, shawl draped neat, her eyes bright though her hands trembled. The sheriff cleared his throat. "Never thought I'd see the day, Hale, but I reckon this county needs a reminder. Bravery ain't in the loudest shout, it's in the quiet that holds fast when everything else falls apart." He tipped his hat toward Ruth. "And this woman proved it truer than any man with a rifle." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some grudging, some admiring. Ruth felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she stood tall. For once, their eyes did not sting her, they honored her. The vows were simple. Jonas signed them, his hands sure and unhurried. "I will keep faith, through fire, storm, and silence. You are my partner, my home." Ruth's hands shook as she answered, but her signs were strong. "And I will keep you. In silence, in danger, in every dawn. You are my safe place, my belonging." The sheriff nodded once, his voice carrying. "Then by God's law and man's, you're joined." Cheers rose, ragged but real. Ruth's heart swelled as Jonas clasped her hands, pressing his forehead gently to hers. For a moment, the world fell away, no whispers, no shame, only the steady beat of something new and unbreakable. Afterward, children gathered in the dust, tugging at Ruth's sleeve. Tommy was first, his small hands eager. He signed crookedly, "Family." Her throat tightened. She signed back, "Yes, family." And then others joined, little fingers shaping clumsy words. Friend, home, strong. Mothers watched, some with tears, some with reluctance. But none pulled their children away. Jonas leaned on the corral fence, watching. His eyes carried a rare glint of humor as he signed to her across the yard. "Half the ranch already speaks your language. Give it a year, they'll all be fluent." Ruth laughed soundlessly, joy bursting free in her chest. For the first time in her life, silence was not emptiness. It was a song others had learned to sing with her. That evening, as lanterns glowed in the windows and the ranch hands feasted, Sheriff McCready rose from his seat. He lifted his glass, voice low but sure. "To Ruth Hale," he said, the name ringing out. "May we all find the courage she carried, and may this land remember the day silence spoke louder than hate." The men and women raised their cups, even those who had doubted. Ruth's cheeks burned, but her smile was steady. Jonas reached for her hand under the table, and she gripped his hard, as though anchoring herself to the life they'd built. Later, when the noise died and the fire burned low, Ruth and Jonas walked the corral together. The stars blazed endless above, the prairie wide and still. Ruth's hands lifted one final time. "Do you think they'll remember?" Jonas's reply was plain, blunt as ever. "They won't forget. Not this." And she knew he was right. This story, her story, would be told again and again. How a woman mocked for her silence found her voice in hands, in love, in defiance. How a rancher who rarely spoke gave her a language that built a family. How Dust River learned that sometimes the quiet carried the loudest truth. When dawn came, Ruth stood at the corral once more. Children ran to her, hands already signing. Jonas stood behind her, steady as the land itself, and the silence that had once chained her now carried her higher than any voice ever could. Because in the end, she had spoken, and the world had listened. If this story gave you hope, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend who needs a reminder that silence can speak louder than hate. And if you want more journeys of hardship, redemption, and frontier love, hitch your wagon to this channel and subscribe for the next ride. May your nights be calm, your days be steady, and may you always find family on the trail ahead.